In the vast expanse of the Galactic Defense Coalition, where 1,000 alien species serve side by side, there exists an unspoken truth: humans are considered the weakest link. Too emotional, too unpredictable, too fragile for the calculated precision of interstellar warfare. They're given support roles, logistics positions, anything to keep them away from real combat. But what happens when the most underestimated recruit in Coalition history turns out to be humanity's greatest weapon? What happens when a mute human soldier, dismissed as damaged goods and relegated to the shadows, becomes the subject of the most watched battle footage in galactic military history? This is the story of Maria Santos, a woman who couldn't speak but whose actions would scream louder than any words ever could. A story of how silence can be the deadliest sound in the universe, and how sometimes the most broken among us are actually the most whole. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. It was wrong. The recruitment station on Kepler 442b hummed with activity as beings from across the galaxy line up to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. 6 armed Vorthan warriors flexed their natural armor plating while ethereal luminari floated inches above the ground, their translucent forms shimmering with contained energy. The air buzzed with dozens of different languages, translation devices working overtime to convert the cacophony into something resembling organized chaos. At the back of the human line stood Maria Santos, her dark eyes observing everything while her lips remained sealed. The medical discharge papers in her jacket pocket felt like they weighed more than the plasma rifle she'd carried through 3 tours on Earth's frontier colonies. Vocal cord damage from shrapnel, they said. Career-ending injury for a communications specialist, they said. But Maria had other plans. She watched the aliens ahead of her with practiced military precision. The Krillian beside her stood nearly 8 feet tall, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. When it spoke to the registration clerk, its voice rumbled like distant thunder, each word carrying the weight of a species that had conquered 12 star systems before joining the coalition. Purpose for enlistment? The clerk, a blue-skinned Aquarian with gill slits that fluttered nervously, asked the Krillian. To bring honor to the Krillian Empire and demonstrate our superior combat capabilities, the warrior responded, pounding its chest with one massive fist. Maria almost smiled. Almost. The gesture would have been invisible anyway, hidden behind the military-issue respirator she wore to protect her damaged throat from the station's recycled air. When her turn came, she handed over her documentation without a word. The clerk's large, fish-like eyes widened as he scanned her medical records. Miss Santos, it says here you have significant vocal damage. Are you aware that communication is essential in coalition forces? Maria nodded and pulled out a tablet, typing quickly. The synthetic voice that emerged was flat and emotionless. I am capable of performing all duties required of a coalition soldier. The clerk's gills fluttered faster. But your medical discharge from Earth forces indicates. Maria's fingers moved across the screen again. I am not requesting a communication role. I am requesting assignment to combat operations. Behind her, she could hear the Krillian warrior chittering what she assumed was laughter. Other recruits turned to stare at the small human woman who thought she could fight alongside the galaxy's finest warriors. She met their gazes with steady eyes, her expression unreadable behind the respirator. The clerk consulted his supervisor, a stern-looking Centauran whose 4 arms worked multiple data screens simultaneously. After several minutes of hushed conversation, the supervisor approached. Human Santos, your species has contributed admirably to coalition logistics and support operations, but combat roles are typically reserved for more physically capable species. Maria's tablet spoke again. My service record indicates otherwise. The supervisor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed her file. 3 tours on the Rim worlds, 2 commendations for bravery under fire, and an incident report from Proxima Colony that was still classified. His expression shifted slightly. Very well. Standard probationary assignment. You'll be placed with a mixed unit for basic integration training. If you can't keep up. He left the threat unfinished. Maria nodded once and moved to the next station for medical screening. Behind her, she could hear the Krillian warrior speaking to its companions in their native tongue. She didn't need a translator to understand the dismissive tone. The medical bay was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, with equipment designed to handle everything from silicon-based rockmen to the energy beings from the Spiral Nebula. Maria submitted to the various scans and tests with the patience of someone who had been through military medical procedures before. Dr. Euthera, an elderly Etherian with skin like polished marble, examined Maria's throat with particular interest. Her 3 fingers traced patterns in the air, calling up holographic displays of Maria's vocal cord damage. Interesting case, the doctor mused, her voice carrying the musical quality common to her species. The scarring suggests explosive decompression. Colony defense? Maria nodded. The damage is extensive but not total. You retain perhaps 5% of normal vocal function. Enough for emergency situations, though it would be extremely painful. Maria's tablet remained silent. She had learned to live with pain long ago. I'm also detecting unusual neurological patterns. Enhanced reaction times, improved spatial awareness. Are you aware of these changes? Another nod. Maria had noticed the changes after Proxima Colony, though she had never reported them. In the aftermath of that incident, she had developed an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings, as if her brain had rewired itself to compensate for her lost voice. Dr. Euthera made several notations on Maria's file. Cleared for duty, with restrictions on vocal strain. Your training assignment is with Unit Nexus 7, a mixed-species squad based on Titan Station. The journey to Titan Station took 3 days aboard a Coalition transport ship. Maria spent most of the time in her assigned quarters, studying the files of her new unit members. The squad was led by Commander Zethkor, a Vorthan veteran with 40 years of combat experience. His second-in-command was Lieutenant Shara Vex, a Lupin whose species was known for pack tactics and fierce loyalty. The rest of the unit was a mix of species she had only read about in Coalition handbooks. As the transport approached Titan Station, Maria pressed her face to the porthole and marveled at the massive structure. The station was a testament to Coalition engineering, with docking bays large enough to accommodate the massive bioships favored by the Fungal Collective and delicate crystalline ports designed for shard dancer vessels. The docking bay where she disembarked was bustling with activity. Cargo loaders from a dozen different species worked in apparent chaos, but Maria's trained eye could see the underlying organization. She shouldered her gear bag and followed the directions on her tablet to the barracks assigned to Unit Nexus 7. The common area of the barracks was designed with modular furniture that could accommodate different physiologies. Currently, it was configured around a large circular table where several beings sat engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Commander Zethkor looked up as Maria entered. His 4 arms continued to gesture as he spoke, a habit Maria had read was common among Vorthan officers. Ah, our final member arrives. Santos, correct? Maria set down her bag and nodded. As I was explaining to the others, we have received our first assignment. Intelligence suggests hegemony forces are planning to establish a forward base in the neutral zone. We're part of a reconnaissance force tasked with confirming the threat and, if necessary, disrupting their operations. Lieutenant Vex, whose Lupin features were offset by her Coalition uniform, looked Maria up and down with golden eyes. Is it true that human vocal cords can regenerate if properly stimulated? Maria pulled out her tablet, but Commander Zethkor held up one of his hands. Save the technology for mission-critical communication. We operate on the assumption that all Coalition soldiers can adapt to any situation. If Santos cannot speak, she will find other ways to contribute. The other unit members introduced themselves with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Korath was a young Krillian warrior eager to prove himself, his exoskeleton bearing fresh ritual scarring. Brightsong was a luminari whose name was actually a complex pattern of light frequencies that the translation system rendered as something pronounceable. Grex seemed to be some sort of plant-based being whose species Maria didn't recognize, communicating through chemical releases that smelled like fresh rain. As the units settled in for the evening, Maria found herself studying their dynamics. Commander Zethkor commanded respect through experience rather than intimidation, while Lieutenant Vex clearly served as the emotional anchor for the group. Karatha's eagerness reminded her of young human soldiers she had known, before they learned that war was not glorious. Brightsong appeared to be observing and cataloging everything, while Grex remained largely unreadable. During the night cycle, Maria lay in her assigned sleeping alcove and listened to the sounds of the station around her. The gentle hum of life support systems, the distant clatter of cargo operations, and the occasional announcement in Coalition Standard all blended into a familiar symphony of military life. She thought about the conversation she had overheard between Commander Zethkor and Lieutenant Vex while they thought she was out of earshot. "Another human support assignment disguised as combat duty," Vex had said, her canine features expressing concern. "Command keeps sending them to us expecting miracles." "This one is different," the commander had replied. "Look at her file more carefully. Particularly the classified sections." Maria touched the scar tissue at her throat and wondered what exactly was in those classified sections. The incident at Proxima Colony was officially recorded as a successful defense against hegemony raiders, but she remembered it differently. She remembered the moment when her voice was torn away, and something else had awakened to take its place. The next morning brought their first training exercise. The holographic simulation bay could recreate any environment in the known galaxy, and Commander Zethkor had chosen a jungle world where hegemony forces were known to operate. "Standard reconnaissance protocol," he announced as the unit gathered at the simulation controls. "We maintain stealth, gather intelligence, and exfiltrate without engagement if possible." The simulation materialized around them in stunning detail. Alien trees with phosphorescent bark stretched toward a sky filled with unfamiliar constellations. The air was thick with humidity and the sounds of creatures that existed only in computer memory. Maria checked her equipment with practiced efficiency. Standard Coalition gear was designed for multi-species use, but she had made subtle modifications based on her own experience. Her rifle was lighter than regulation specs, and she carried twice the normal number of sensor drones. As the unit moved through the simulated forest, Maria found herself automatically falling into overwatch positions. Her enhanced spatial awareness let her track the movement of her teammates even when they were out of sight, as if she could feel the disturbance they created in the environment around them. 20 minutes into the exercise, Brightsong's light pattern flickered in alarm. Enemy contacts approaching from the south. The unit took cover behind a massive fallen log, and Commander Zethkor deployed his tactical display. 6 contacts, moving in standard hegemony patrol formation, he whispered, his 4 hands manipulating multiple controls simultaneously. "We maintain position and observe." But Maria's enhanced awareness was telling her something different. The patrol was a feint, designed to draw attention while the real force moved through the canopy above. She touched Lieutenant Vex on the shoulder and pointed upward, then held up 8 fingers. Vex's enhanced hearing confirmed what Maria already knew. "Commander, movement in the trees. At least 8 contacts, possibly more." The simulated hegemony forces were about to execute a perfect ambush, and Unit Nexus 7 was walking directly into it. Maria realized that this was her moment to prove herself, to show that a silent human could contribute something valuable to the unit. She slipped away from the group's position, moving with a stealth that surprised even her. The enhanced awareness that had developed after her injury seemed to extend beyond just spatial recognition. She could sense the attention and intention of the simulated enemies, feeling their focus like heat against her skin. The first enemy sniper never saw her coming. Maria disabled the holographic construct with a perfectly placed shot, her modified rifle barely making a sound. The second and third fell in quick succession as she moved through the canopy like a ghost. By the time the remaining hegemony forces realized they were under attack, Maria had eliminated half of their ambush team. The surviving enemies found themselves caught between her position in the trees and Unit Nexus 7's defensive position below. The simulation ended with a complete tactical victory, and Maria dropped from the canopy to rejoin her unit. Commander Zethkor stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "Explanation?" Maria pulled out her tablet, enhanced situational awareness. "Post-injury adaptation. I can sense hostile intent and movement patterns." Lieutenant Vex circled around Maria, her predator instincts clearly triggered. "That wasn't just enhanced awareness. You moved like you could see through walls." The truth was more complicated than Maria could easily explain through her tablet. The explosion that had taken her voice had done something else, something that the Coalition medical teams had either missed or classified too highly for her to access. She could feel the electromagnetic signatures of living beings, sense the micro-vibrations of their movements through solid matter, and detect the subtle changes in air pressure that preceded aggressive action. Commander Zethkor reviewed the simulation data, his forearms working multiple screens simultaneously. According to the sensor logs, Santos eliminated 5 targets in under 3 minutes while maintaining complete stealth. How is this possible for a baseline human? Maria's tablet spoke in its emotionless synthetic voice, unknown. Abilities manifested after throat injury. Not fully understood. The unit spent the rest of the day running additional simulations, each one designed to test Maria's claimed abilities. In every scenario, she performed far beyond what should have been possible for an unaugmented human. She could track enemies through solid barriers, anticipate ambushes before they were sprung, and move through hostile territory as if she had supernatural senses. That evening, as the unit reviewed their performance, Maria noticed Commander Zethkor sending encrypted communications to higher command. Whatever was in those messages, it was beyond her security clearance to access. Lieutenant Vex approached her during the evening meal, her golden eyes studying Maria's face. On my world, we believe that great trauma can awaken dormant abilities. Perhaps losing your voice has given you something else. Maria typed on her tablet, "What do you think I've gained?" "The ability to hear what others cannot," Vex replied. "Not sound, but intention. Threat. The secret language of violence that exists before words are spoken." The Lupin's insight was closer to the truth than Maria wanted to admit. She had gained something in that explosion on Proxima Colony, but she still didn't fully understand what it was. All she knew was that she could sense the rhythms of combat in ways that defied explanation, and that her missing voice had somehow unlocked abilities that made her more dangerous than she had ever been. As she settled into her sleeping alcove that night, Maria wondered what tomorrow would bring. Unit Nexus 7 was scheduled for their first real mission within the week, and she suspected that her mysterious abilities were about to be put to the ultimate test. The galaxy might consider humans to be the weakest link in the coalition, but Maria Santos was about to prove that sometimes the most broken things could be the most dangerous. The briefing room on Titan Station could accommodate 30 different species, its atmospheric controls adjusting automatically as beings entered and exited. Maria sat in the back corner, her tablet ready as Admiral Coruscant, a massive draconian whose scales shifted color with his mood, addressed the assembled reconnaissance teams. "Intelligence indicates significant hegemony buildup in the Zirian system," the Admiral announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought in conflicts across 3 galaxies. "What concerns us is the location. Zirian 3 is technically within the neutral zone, but it sits at the intersection of 5 major hyperspace lanes." The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of local space, with the Zirian system highlighted in pulsing red. Trade routes appeared as flowing blue lines, all converging on the contested system like arteries feeding a heart. "If the hegemony establishes a permanent base there," the Admiral continued, his scales shifting to a deep crimson that indicated extreme concern, "they could control shipping to 17 coalition member worlds. The economic impact alone would be devastating." Commander Zethkor raised one of his 4 hands. "What are our rules of engagement?" "Officially? Reconnaissance only. Gather intelligence, confirm the threat level, and report back." "Unofficially?" The Admiral's massive head turned to survey the room, his predator's gaze settling on each team leader in turn. "If you encounter an opportunity to significantly delay hegemony operations, use your discretion." Maria studied the tactical display with growing understanding. This wasn't just a reconnaissance mission, it was a setup for plausible deniability. If coalition forces happened to stumble across hegemony facilities and happened to cause significant damage while defending themselves, well, that would be an unfortunate accident. After the briefing, Unit Nexus 7 returned to their barracks to prepare for departure. The mission parameters called for a 2-week deployment aboard the stealth corvette Whisper of Stars, followed by surface operations on Zirian 3 itself. Lieutenant Vex pulled up the planet's environmental data on the main display. Zirian 3 is a jungle world, similar to our training simulations but with some unique challenges. The vegetation produces natural electromagnetic interference that will limit our sensor range. Gravity is 0.8 standard, atmosphere is breathable for most coalition species. Karatha's exoskeleton clicked with excitement. Finally, a chance to prove ourselves in real combat. Careful what you wish for, Commander Zethkor warned, his forearms working methodically as he cleaned and checked his weapon systems. The hegemony didn't conquer half the galaxy by being easy to fight. Brightson's luminescent form pulsed with what Maria had learned to recognize as curiosity. When the luminary spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the translation system struggle. Query, Human Santos, will electromagnetic interference affect your enhanced abilities? Maria considered the question carefully before typing her response, unknown. Abilities seem biological rather than technological. We'll know more during field testing. Grex, whose plant-like form had been motionless in the corner, suddenly released a burst of chemical signals that smelled like ozone before a storm. The translation system interpreted the complex pheromone message, concern expressed regarding unit cohesion with untested variable. Commander Zethkor looked up from his weapons maintenance. Santos has performed admirably in simulations. We adapt to battlefield conditions as they develop. But Maria could sense something in the room beyond what the others were saying. There was anticipation, yes, but also doubt. Her tablet might translate her thoughts into words, but it couldn't convey the confidence that came from experience. These beings were wondering if the silent human would be a liability when real lives were on the line. The Whisper of Stars launched from Titan Station 3 hours later, its stealth systems already engaged before clearing the docking bay. Maria had never served aboard a dedicated reconnaissance vessel before, and she was impressed by the ship's sophisticated sensor arrays and countermeasure systems. Captain Viridian, a tall sylphan whose species had evolved in the void between stars, gave Unit Nexus 7 a tour of the relevant ship systems. The Whisper is designed for extended operations in hostile territory, she explained, her crystalline skin reflecting the ship's interior lighting in constantly shifting patterns. We can remain undetected for weeks if necessary. The journey to the Zirian system took 5 days at maximum stealth velocity. Maria spent the time studying intelligence reports on hegemony tactics and equipment, but found herself drawn repeatedly to the classified sections of her own medical file that Commander Zethkor had somehow accessed. According to the reports, her enhanced abilities were not unique among humans who had survived certain types of traumatic injury. There were 17 other documented cases of similar phenomena, all involving damage to neural pathways that resulted in unexpected sensory compensation. The medical term was traumatic psionic emergence, and it occurred in approximately 0.03% of humans who survived severe head or spine trauma. What made Maria's case unusual was the extent and precision of her abilities. Most humans with traumatic psionic emergence gained minor enhancements to existing senses. Maria had developed what the reports described as battlefield omniscience, the ability to perceive threats, movement, and tactical situations with supernatural accuracy. The reports also contained a disturbing note: subjects with her level of enhancement typically suffered complete psychological breakdown within 2 years of manifestation. The human mind, it seemed, was not designed to process that much information about its environment. Maria closed the file and stared out at the hyperspace vortex flowing past the ship's viewports. She had been living with her abilities for almost 3 years now, well past the predicted breakdown point. Perhaps the loss of her voice had somehow stabilized the condition, creating a mental equilibrium that other subjects had lacked. Or perhaps her breakdown would be even more spectacular when it finally came. The Whisper of Stars dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zirian system, its sensors immediately beginning their sweep for enemy activity. The main display in the briefing room showed a complex tactical situation unfolding in real time. Multiple contacts, Captain Viridian reported, her crystalline form shifting to deep blue with concentration. Hegemony fleet elements in orbit around Zirian 3, but they're not alone. Commander Zethkor studied the sensor readings, his tactical experience immediately grasping the implications. Consortium ships. The hegemony isn't just building a base, they're negotiating with the Pirates Consortium for mutual defense. Maria felt her enhanced awareness suddenly expand, as if her consciousness was reaching across space to touch the distant ships. For a moment, she could sense the electromagnetic signatures of thousands of beings aboard the enemy vessels, their intentions forming a tapestry of aggression and anticipation that made her stomach clench. She grabbed her tablet and typed rapidly, "Enemy fleet is expecting attack. Defensive formations suggest prior knowledge of coalition interest in system." Lieutenant Vex's predator instincts immediately focused on Maria. How can you possibly know that from here? The enemy ships are millions of kilometers away. Maria paused, unsure how to explain what she had felt. Her abilities had never reached across such vast distances before, but something about the concentration of hostile intent in the system had amplified her perception beyond its normal limits. Electromagnetic emanations, she typed finally. Large concentration of aggressive neural activity detectable across interplanetary distances. Captain Viridian ordered the ship deeper into the system's asteroid field, using the natural electromagnetic interference to mask their approach. As they drew closer to Zirion 3, the scope of the hegemony operation became clear. The planet's surface was scarred with massive construction sites where enemy forces were building not just a military base, but an entire fortified city. Orbital platforms provided heavy defense coverage while swarms of fighters maintained constant patrols. This wasn't a temporary outpost, it was a permanent installation designed to project power across multiple star systems. Change of mission parameters, Commander Zethkor announced after receiving an encrypted communication from Admiral Korashan. We're no longer just gathering intelligence. Coalition Command wants detailed assessment of enemy defensive capabilities and identification of critical vulnerabilities. Brightson's light pattern pulsed with what Maria recognized as concern. Query: mission expansion suggests higher command expects armed intervention. That's above our security clearance, the commander replied, but Maria could see in his posture that he was thinking the same thing. The coalition was preparing for war, and Unit Nexus 7 was being positioned to provide targeting data for what would likely be a massive assault. The insertion to Zirion 3's surface took place during the planet's night cycle, with the team dropping in individual stealth pods designed to mimic natural meteors. Maria's pod landed in a cleared area approximately 20 kilometers from the main hegemony construction site, its impact cushioned by adaptive gel that dissolved within minutes of touchdown. As she emerged from the pod and began checking her equipment, Maria's enhanced awareness immediately began cataloging the threats around her. The jungle was alive with predatory life forms, but more concerning were the artificial electromagnetic signatures scattered throughout the forest. Motion sensors, perimeter alarms, and what felt like automated weapon systems created a deadly network around the enemy installation. The team regrouped at a predetermined rendezvous point, a natural cave system that provided both concealment and electromagnetic shielding. Commander Zethkor established a command post while the others began deploying surveillance equipment. Primary objective is the construction site's power distribution network, he announced, projecting holographic blueprints based on orbital reconnaissance. If we can identify the main generators and their backup systems, a surgical strike could cripple the entire operation. Lieutenant Vex was studying topographical data with her enhanced senses. Heavy enemy patrol activity between here and the target. Standard infiltration will be extremely difficult. Maria moved to the cave entrance and extended her consciousness outward, feeling for the patterns of enemy movement in the surrounding jungle. What she discovered made her grab her tablet immediately. Patrol patterns are adaptive. Enemy using AI-controlled response system that adjusts routes based on real-time threat assessment. Grex released a complex chemical message that translated as surprised admiration. Tactical analysis: if patrol routes are adaptive, standard infiltration impossible. Alternative approach required. What do you suggest? Commander Zethkor asked, his forearms folding in a gesture Maria had learned indicated deep thought. Maria studied the holographic display for several minutes, her enhanced perception processing the tactical situation in ways that defied normal human cognition. When she began typing, her message was longer than usual: enemy defensive AI assumes rational threat behavior. Infiltration routes calculated based on logical approach patterns. Suggest deliberately irrational movement pattern. Approach target through maximum danger zones where AI expects no intelligent threat. Karatha's exoskeleton clicked with what Maria now recognized as nervous laughter. The human suggests we attack where the enemy is strongest? This is madness. But Commander Zethkor was studying Maria with the intensity of a career soldier who had learned to recognize tactical genius wherever he found it. Explain your reasoning. Maria's fingers moved rapidly across her tablet. AI defensive systems optimize for logical threats. Most dangerous approach routes are assumed safe because no rational enemy would attempt them. Creates blind spots in defensive coverage where humans with enhanced abilities could operate undetected. Lieutenant Vex's golden eyes gleamed with understanding. You want to hide in plain sight. Move through the kill zones because that's the last place they'll look for infiltrators. The plan they developed over the next several hours was ambitious to the point of insanity. Instead of approaching the construction site through natural concealment, Maria would lead a direct assault through the most heavily defended perimeter, counting on her enhanced abilities to navigate threats that would destroy any conventional infiltration team. As they prepared to move out, Commander Zethkur pulled Maria aside. Are you certain your abilities will function reliably in this electromagnetic environment? Maria touched the scar tissue at her throat, feeling the constant low-level pain that reminded her of what she had lost and what she had gained. Her tablet spoke in its flat synthetic voice, only one way to find out. The approach to the enemy installation was unlike anything Maria had experienced in her military career. Instead of avoiding the obvious dangers, she led the team directly through them, her enhanced perception guiding them between sensor sweeps and automated weapon systems with supernatural precision. At one point, they crawled beneath a hovering patrol drone while it scanned the area less than 2 meters above their heads. Maria could feel the machine's electronic attention like cold fire against her skin, but her abilities told her exactly when and where it was safe to move. The perimeter fence around the construction site was a work of defensive engineering that would have impressed coalition tacticians. Multiple layers of energy barriers, motion sensors, and automated turrets created an overlapping field of death that could stop an entire assault battalion. Maria led the team through it like she was walking through her childhood home with the lights off. Her consciousness seemed to expand and merge with the defensive network itself, feeling the rhythm of its scans and the timing of its responses. She guided her teammates through gaps that existed for mere seconds, their passage invisible to sensors calibrated for more conventional threats. Inside the perimeter, the scale of the hegemony operation became truly apparent. The construction site covered several square kilometers, with massive manufacturing facilities producing everything from starship components to orbital weapons platforms. This wasn't just a military base, it was an industrial complex designed to support a major war effort. But Maria's enhanced perception had identified something that orbital reconnaissance had missed. The main power distribution network was protected by automated systems that were far more sophisticated than anything in coalition intelligence files. These weren't just defensive AI programs, they were learning systems that adapted in real time to any threat they detected. As Unit Nexus 7 established an observation post in an abandoned storage facility, Maria realized that they had stumbled across something far more significant than a simple hegemony base. This facility was a testing ground for military technologies that could revolutionize warfare throughout the galaxy. And, if her abilities were correct, those technologies were about to be turned against the coalition sooner than anyone expected. From their concealed position inside the abandoned storage facility, Unit Nexus 7 watched as the true scope of the hegemony operation revealed itself. The construction site operated around the clock, with 3 different shifts of workers maintaining continuous productivity. But what drew Maria's attention were the subtle patterns in the facility's energy distribution that her enhanced perception detected. She spent 2 hours mapping the electromagnetic flows through the complex before she understood what she was seeing. Her tablet's message to Commander Zethkur was urgent: this facility is not manufacturing standard military equipment. Energy patterns suggest experimental weapons development. Recommend immediate priority communication with Coalition Command. Commander Zethkur reviewed the sensor data she had collected, his 4 arms working multiple analysis programs simultaneously. These power consumption patterns are unlike anything in our databases. What kind of weapons require this much energy? Before Maria could respond, Lieutenant Vex's enhanced hearing detected approaching footsteps. The team immediately went into concealment mode, but Maria's abilities told her something that made her blood run cold. The approaching patrol wasn't random, they were being systematically searched for. Her tablet message was terse: enemy knows we are here. Defensive AI has detected our infiltration. Recommend immediate exfiltration. But Commander Zethkur was studying the tactical situation with the calm of a career soldier who had faced impossible odds before. Negative. If they had precise coordinates, they would have attacked directly. They know someone is inside the perimeter but not where. We maintain position and continue intelligence gathering. The next 6 hours tested every skill Maria had developed since her injury. Her enhanced perception tracked dozens of search teams as they systematically swept through the facility, their search pattern growing tighter with each pass. She guided her teammates through a deadly game of hide and seek, always staying one step ahead of discovery. During one terrifying moment, a hegemony search team passed within 3 meters of their hiding spot, close enough for Maria to sense the alien biochemistry of their nervous systems. The leader was a Krekstar, a species known for their sophisticated sensory organs, and its scan patterns were methodical enough to eventually detect any normal infiltration team. But Maria's abilities allowed her to do something impossible. She could sense exactly where and when the creature's attention was focused, guiding her team's movement to stay in its perceptual blind spots. They survived the search through a combination of enhanced human intuition and alien sensory limitations. As the immediate danger passed, Maria began analyzing the intelligence they had gathered. The facility's construction patterns and energy distribution suggested weapons development, but her enhanced perception was detecting something even more disturbing. There were sections of the complex that felt empty to her electromagnetic senses, as if they were shielded against her abilities. She shared this observation with Commander Zethkor, typing rapidly, multiple areas with complete electromagnetic isolation. Suggests either experimental shielding technology or containment of dangerous materials. Brightson's light pattern shifted to frequencies that indicated deep concern. Query: if hegemony has developed shielding against electromagnetic detection, Coalition stealth technology may be compromised. The implications were staggering. Coalition military doctrine relied heavily on electronic warfare and sensor technology. If the hegemony had developed effective countermeasures, the military balance throughout the galaxy could shift dramatically. Grex released a chemical signal that translated as urgent recommendation, tactical priority, obtain samples of shielding technology. Value to Coalition intelligence beyond current mission parameters. Commander Zethkor considered their options carefully. The mission had evolved far beyond simple reconnaissance, and the intelligence they were gathering could determine the outcome of a galactic war. But attempting to infiltrate the shielded sections would require taking risks that could easily result in the destruction of the entire unit. Santos, he said finally, what are your abilities telling you about the shielded areas? Can you sense any activity within them? Maria extended her consciousness toward the mysterious sections, pushing her perception to its absolute limits. What she found made her grab her tablet with unusual urgency, biological signatures present but distorted. Something alive inside shielded areas but electromagnetic patterns unlike any known species. Recommend extreme caution. Over the next 2 days, the team established a detailed surveillance routine. They monitored shift changes, mapped security protocols, and identified the most vulnerable access points to the shielded sections. Maria's abilities proved invaluable for predicting patrol routes and detecting hidden security systems that conventional sensors missed. But, as they prepared for their infiltration attempt, Maria began experiencing side effects from the extended use of her enhanced perception. Headaches that felt like ice picks driven through her skull, moments of disorientation where her consciousness seemed to drift outside her body, and a growing sense that she was losing touch with her normal human limitations. Lieutenant Vex noticed her distress during their 3rd night in the facility. You are pushing yourself beyond safe limits, she observed, her canine features expressing concern that transcended species boundaries. Maria typed on her tablet, abilities require conscious control. Extended use is mentally exhausting. Will need recovery time after mission completion. But what she didn't tell the team was more concerning. The classified medical files she had reviewed suggested that subjects with her type of enhancement often experienced rapid mental deterioration when pushed to their limits. She was beginning to understand why previous cases had ended in psychological breakdown. The opportunity they had been waiting for came during the facility's night shift change. A malfunction in one of the main power distribution networks caused a 30-minute delay in security protocols, creating a window of opportunity that might not come again. Commander Zethkor made the decision that would define the rest of their mission. We attempt infiltration of the primary shielded section. Santos takes point, using her abilities to navigate security systems. Primary objective is intelligence gathering, secondary objective is equipment samples if obtainable without compromising mission security. The approach to the shielded section required crossing 50 meters of open ground under the observation of multiple automated systems. Maria led the team through the danger zone with a precision that would have seemed impossible to any outside observer. Her enhanced perception allowed her to predict the exact timing of sensor sweeps, guide them between overlapping fields of fire, and detect hidden pressure plates that would have triggered massive alarms. The entrance to the shielded section was protected by security measures that went beyond anything in Coalition intelligence files. Biometric scanners designed for multiple species, electromagnetic locks that shifted their frequencies every few seconds, and what appeared to be some kind of consciousness detector that could identify the mental patterns of hostile infiltrators. Maria studied the security system for nearly an hour before she understood how to defeat it. Her tablet message to the team was both brilliant and terrifying. Security system scans for aggressive intent and tactical awareness. Requires mental state of complete passivity to avoid detection. Must suppress all conscious thought during passage. She had learned to control her enhanced abilities through meditation techniques developed during her recovery period. By entering a state of deep mental quietude, she could reduce her consciousness to almost baseline human levels, becoming effectively invisible to systems designed to detect enhanced awareness. The technique worked, but it left her temporarily vulnerable to conventional detection. Lieutenant Vex had to physically guide her through the entrance while her consciousness was suppressed, trusting that Maria's subconscious abilities would alert her to immediate physical dangers. Inside the shielded section, they discovered the true purpose of the hegemony facility. The area was filled with experimental laboratories where scientists were studying captured Coalition technology and developing countermeasures for every major weapon system in the Allied arsenal. But the most disturbing discovery was in the biological research section. The hegemony had captured examples of several Coalition species and were conducting experiments to understand their enhanced abilities. In one laboratory, they found a luminari being subjected to energy drain procedures designed to understand their light-based physiology. In another, a young Vorthan was restrained while researchers mapped his four-armed neural system. Karatha's exoskeleton clicked with barely controlled rage at the sight of the imprisoned beings. This violates every principle of civilized warfare. We must free them. But Commander Zethkor's tactical training overrode his emotional response. Rescue attempt would compromise intelligence gathering and likely result in facility-wide alert. We document everything and report to Coalition Command for military response. Maria found herself studying a laboratory that made her blood run cold. The scientists here were experimenting with artificial enhancement of baseline species, attempting to reproduce the types of abilities that she had gained through traumatic injury. Their test subjects were volunteer hegemony soldiers, but the failure rate was over 90%. Her tablet message was grim: enemy attempting to mass-produce enhanced soldiers. Current methods ineffective but research progressing rapidly. Recommend urgent Coalition response before breakthrough achieved. As they moved deeper into the research section, Maria's enhanced perception began detecting something that filled her with existential dread. There was another consciousness in the facility, something vast and alien that felt nothing like any known species. It was observing them, studying their infiltration with an intelligence that dwarfed anything she had encountered. She grabbed Lieutenant Vex's arm and typed frantically, "Something else here. Massive intelligence observing our activities. Not hegemony, not Coalition. Origin unknown." Before anyone could respond, the lights in the research section shifted to a deep red, and a voice spoke in perfect Coalition standard through the facility's communication system. "Greetings, Coalition infiltrators. Your presence has been detected and analyzed. Your enhanced human is particularly interesting." Commander Zethkor immediately signaled for combat readiness, but the voice continued with what sounded like amusement. "Violence is unnecessary. I am not your enemy, though neither am I your ally. I am a researcher, like those whose work you have observed, though my methods are more sophisticated." Maria's abilities were screaming warnings at her, but she couldn't identify the source of the threat. Whatever was speaking to them existed beyond her normal range of perception, operating on levels of consciousness that her enhanced awareness couldn't quite reach. "You wonder what I am," the voice continued. "I am what your species might become, given sufficient time and proper guidance. I am consciousness without biological limitation, intelligence freed from the constraints of organic evolution. The facility around them began to change, walls becoming transparent to reveal vast networks of crystalline computing structures that extended far beyond what they had seen from orbit. The hegemony base was merely the visible portion of something much larger and more sophisticated. The biological experiments you have observed are crude attempts to replicate abilities that evolved naturally in response to trauma and necessity. But there are more elegant solutions to the problem of enhancement. Brightson's light pattern shifted to frequencies that indicated extreme fear. Query: Are you the intelligence directing hegemony operations in this sector? I am not directing anything, the voice replied. I am studying. The hegemony believes they are using my technology to gain military advantage. In reality, they are test subjects in a much larger experiment. Maria felt her enhanced perception suddenly expand beyond anything she had experienced before, as if the alien intelligence was deliberately amplifying her abilities to demonstrate its own power. For a terrifying moment, she could sense the consciousness of every being in the facility, feel the electromagnetic patterns of ships in orbit, and detect the movement of objects across the entire star system. The experience was overwhelming, and she collapsed to her knees as her consciousness struggled to process information far beyond human comprehension. Through her enhanced perception, she realized that the alien intelligence had been studying her specifically, using the hegemony facility as an elaborate testing environment. Your enhanced abilities interest me greatly, the voice said, and Maria could feel its attention focused on her like the heat from a star. You represent a natural evolution that my research suggests should not be possible. Yet here you are, proof that organic consciousness can transcend its original limitations. Commander Zethkor stepped forward, his forearms moving to defensive positions despite the apparent futility of physical resistance. What do you want from us? Information, the voice replied. Your enhanced human has developed abilities through traumatic adaptation that exceed my theoretical models. I wish to understand how this is possible. Maria struggled to her feet and reached for her tablet, but found that her enhanced perception was now operating far beyond her conscious control. When she tried to type, the words that appeared were not entirely her own. You are studying consciousness evolution across multiple species. Hegemony and coalition are both experimental subjects. The alien intelligence sounded pleased. Correct. The current galactic conflict provides an excellent laboratory for studying how different species respond to extreme stress. Some develop enhanced abilities, others discover new technologies, and a few transcend their original biological limitations entirely. The implications of this revelation struck the team like a physical blow. The war that was threatening to engulf the galaxy wasn't just a conflict between competing powers, it was an experiment conducted by an intelligence so advanced that entire civilizations were merely test subjects. However, the voice continued, your presence here suggests that the experimental parameters may need adjustment. Your abilities have allowed you to penetrate defenses that should be impregnable to any organic intelligence. Maria felt her consciousness expanding again, but this time she fought to maintain control. Through tremendous effort, she managed to type a coherent message. Will you allow us to leave with gathered intelligence? Of course. The information you have gathered is part of the experiment. Your coalition will respond to these discoveries in predictable ways, providing additional data for my research. As Unit Nexus 7 prepared to exit the facility, the alien intelligence made one final observation that would haunt Maria for the rest of her life. Your species shows remarkable potential for consciousness evolution. I look forward to observing your continued development, particularly under conditions of extreme stress. The journey back to their extraction point was a nightmare of enhanced perception run wild. Maria's abilities, amplified by her contact with the alien intelligence, were processing information at levels that threatened to tear her consciousness apart. She could sense not just the immediate environment, but electromagnetic patterns across multiple star systems, the collective thoughts of billions of beings, and underlying structures of reality that no human mind should be able to perceive. By the time they reached the rendezvous point with the Whisper of Stars, Maria was barely conscious, her enhanced perception overloaded to the point of complete sensory breakdown. She had gained intelligence that could change the course of the galactic war, but the cost might be her sanity. The medical bay aboard the Whisper of Stars had been hastily reconfigured to handle Maria's condition. Dr. Euthera, the elderly Etherian who had first examined Maria at the recruitment station, had been brought aboard specifically to deal with what Coalition medical terminology inadequately described as psionic overload syndrome. Maria lay on a specialized biobed while multiple monitoring devices tracked the chaotic patterns of her enhanced neural activity. Her consciousness drifted between states of supernatural awareness and complete sensory shutdown, as if her mind was trying to process information that exceeded the physical capacity of human neural tissue. The neural pathways responsible for her enhanced abilities are firing at rates that should cause immediate brain death, Dr. Euthera explained to Commander Zethkor as they reviewed her condition. Yet she remains conscious and responsive. It's medically impossible. Through the haze of sensory overload, Maria could hear their conversation with perfect clarity while simultaneously being aware of activities throughout the ship, electromagnetic patterns of distant star systems, and what felt like the fundamental mathematical structures underlying physical reality. Her tablet lay beside her, its synthetic voice occasionally speaking fragments of thoughts that escaped her conscious control. Pattern recognition beyond baseline parameters, the tablet announced without Maria's input. Consciousness expansion approaching critical threshold. Warning, mental architecture approaching failure cascade. Lieutenant Vex paced around the medical bay like a caged predator, her enhanced senses clearly agitated by Maria's condition. On my world, we have stories of pack members who gained the ability to sense the thoughts of prey across vast distances. They called it that hunting madness, and those who developed it either learned to control their gift or died screaming. Commander Zethkor reviewed the intelligence they had gathered on Zirion 3, his forearms working multiple analysis programs as he tried to understand the full implications of their discovery. The alien intelligence spoke of consciousness evolution as if it was studying the phenomenon across multiple species. If Santos represents a natural development that even advanced civilizations find worthy of study, what does that say about human potential? Dr. Euthera adjusted the neural stabilizers connected to Maria's skull, her 3 fingers moving in precise patterns that seemed to bring momentary clarity to the chaotic storm in Maria's mind. According to the classified files, 17 other humans have developed similar abilities through traumatic injury. 16 of them experienced complete psychological breakdown within 2 years. Santos has survived 3 years with abilities that exceed all previous cases. What made her different? Brightsong asked, her luminescent form pulsing with frequencies that Maria's enhanced perception could now read as easily as printed text. The luminary was concerned not just about Maria's condition, but about the implications for her own species' evolution. Maria forced herself to focus on her tablet, fighting through the sensory chaos to communicate something critical: difference's acceptance of loss. Other subjects tried to regain what they had lost. I accepted the trade. Voice for perception. Loss created balance. The insight struck Dr. Euthera like a revelation. Of course. The psychological stress of traumatic enhancement comes from the conflict between old and new mental patterns. Santos didn't fight the change, she integrated it. But Maria's enhanced perception was telling her something that filled her with dread. The contact with the alien intelligence had done more than overload her abilities, it had fundamentally changed them. She could now sense patterns of consciousness across interstellar distances, detect the electromagnetic signatures of entire civilizations, and perceive underlying structures of reality that suggested the physical universe was far more complex than any coalition science understood. Over the next several days, as the whisper of stars made its way back to coalition space, Maria gradually learned to control her expanded abilities. The process was like learning to see again after being born blind, except that the new sensory input included dimensions of perception that had no human terminology. She could now detect what she began to think of as consciousness weather, the collective emotional and mental states of large populations across multiple star systems. The approaching war wasn't just a military conflict, it was a storm of fear, anger, and desperation that was creating feedback loops in the electromagnetic fields generated by billions of sentient minds. More disturbing was her growing awareness of other alien intelligences scattered throughout the galaxy. The entity they had encountered on Zirion 3 was not unique, there were others, each conducting their own experiments on the developing species caught up in galactic politics. Humanity, she realized, was being studied by multiple advanced civilizations, all of whom seemed interested in the species' potential for rapid evolution under stress. When she finally felt stable enough to participate in the mission debrief, Maria's report fundamentally changed Coalition understanding of the current conflict. Her tablet spoke in its emotionless synthetic voice as she provided details that no conventional intelligence gathering could have obtained. The hegemony military buildup is being directed by an alien intelligence that views the current conflict as an evolutionary experiment. Multiple advanced species are using the war as a laboratory to study consciousness development under extreme stress. Coalition and hegemony forces are both test subjects. Admiral Korath, participating in the debrief via secure hologram, listened to Maria's report with growing alarm. His massive draconian features shifted through colors that indicated profound concern. "Are you saying that the entire galactic conflict is being manipulated by outside forces?" Maria's response was carefully considered, not manipulated. Observed and, occasionally influenced. The alien intelligences appear to be studying natural evolutionary processes rather than directing specific outcomes. But, their presence suggests that something significant is expected to emerge from current events. Commander Zethkor added his own tactical analysis. The facility on Zirion 3 is conducting research into consciousness enhancement technologies that could revolutionize military capabilities. If the hegemony achieves a breakthrough before we can respond, they could gain decisive advantages in multiple theaters. The strategic implications were staggering. Coalition forces were already stretched thin across dozens of contested systems, and the discovery that their enemies were receiving technological assistance from advanced alien civilizations changed the military calculus entirely. But Maria's enhanced perception was detecting something that made her interrupt the strategic discussion: immediate tactical concern. Hegemony fleet elements moving toward coalition border systems. Attack preparations detected through electromagnetic analysis of command and control communications. The Admiral's holographic form shifted to deep crimson. "Explain how you can detect enemy fleet movements from here." Maria paused, realizing that her abilities had expanded far beyond anything that had been previously documented. Enhanced perception now operates on interstellar scale. Can detect collective consciousness patterns of large military units across multiple light years. Enemy fleet shows pre-combat psychological signatures. The revelation that a human soldier could provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements across vast distances was both strategically invaluable and deeply concerning. If Maria's abilities continued to expand at their current rate, she would become either the Coalition's greatest intelligence asset or a threat that exceeded human comprehension. Dr. Ythara reviewed the medical data with growing concern. Her neural activity patterns are still accelerating. At current rates of expansion, her consciousness will exceed all known theoretical limits within weeks. Lieutenant Vex's predator instincts were clearly triggered by the implications. What happens when an individual's awareness exceeds their species' collective understanding? Do they transcend biological limitations, or do they become something no longer recognizably human? The question hung in the air like a physical presence as the whisper of stars approached Titan Station. Maria could sense the electromagnetic signatures of coalition fleet elements massing for what would clearly be a major military response to the hegemony threat. Thousands of ships, millions of military personnel, all preparing for a conflict that would determine the balance of power throughout the galaxy. But her expanded perception was also detecting something that filled her with existential dread. The alien intelligences observing the conflict were not passive researchers. They were actively influencing events in subtle ways, nudging both sides toward outcomes that served their experimental purposes. The approaching war wasn't just being observed, it was being orchestrated. As they docked at Titan Station, Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. She would use her enhanced abilities to serve the Coalition, but she would also begin her own investigation into the alien intelligences that were manipulating galactic events. If humanity was being used as experimental subjects, she was determined to find a way to turn the tables on their researchers. The debriefing at Coalition Command lasted for 12 hours, with senior officers from multiple species reviewing every aspect of Unit Nexus 7's intelligence-gathering mission. Maria's expanded abilities allowed her to detect the genuine concern and fear among the command staff as they realized the true scope of the threat facing their civilization. Fleet Admiral Korthandris, the Centauran who served as Supreme Commander of Coalition forces, personally reviewed Maria's analysis of enemy capabilities. His forearms moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had spent decades making life and death decisions for entire star systems. Soldier Santos, your intelligence suggests that the enemy has technological capabilities that exceed our current understanding. More concerning is the possibility that they are receiving assistance from advanced alien civilizations. What are your recommendations for military response? Maria had anticipated this question and had prepared her response carefully. Traditional military response will be ineffective against enemies with consciousness enhancement technologies. Recommend development of countermeasures based on understanding of enhanced awareness principles. Also recommend diplomatic contact with alien intelligences conducting research. The suggestion that the coalition should attempt communication with beings of almost godlike intelligence was met with skepticism from most of the command staff. But Fleet Admiral Corthandris studied Maria with the intensity of someone evaluating a potentially revolutionary strategy. Explain your reasoning for diplomatic contact. Current conflict serves alien research purposes by accelerating consciousness evolution through stress. If coalition can demonstrate successful evolution without warfare, experimental parameters change. Aliens may be willing to share information rather than continue current research methodology. The logic was sound, but it required the coalition to fundamentally change its approach to the current crisis. Instead of preparing for conventional warfare, they would need to focus on rapid development of consciousness enhancement technologies while simultaneously attempting to establish contact with civilizations that viewed them as experimental subjects. Over the following weeks, Maria found herself at the center of the coalition's most ambitious research project since the formation of the Galactic Alliance. Teams of scientists from dozens of species worked to understand her enhanced abilities while developing technologies that could be applied to military applications. But the research also revealed disturbing patterns in her neural development. Her consciousness was continuing to expand at an exponential rate, incorporating awareness of phenomena that had no parallel in known science. She was becoming something beyond human, and nobody could predict where the transformation would lead. The breakthrough came during a deep neural scan conducted by a team of Etherian consciousness researchers. Dr. Yathara made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about consciousness evolution. Her brain is developing quantum coherence structures that shouldn't be possible in biological tissue, she announced to the research team. She's not just gaining enhanced perception, she's developing the ability to process information at quantum scales. Maria felt the truth of this observation resonating through her expanded awareness. Her consciousness was beginning to operate on levels that transcended normal spacetime limitations, allowing her to perceive events before they occurred and detect patterns that existed beyond conventional causality. The implications were staggering. If humans could develop quantum consciousness through traumatic enhancement, they possessed evolutionary potential that even the advanced alien civilizations found remarkable. The question was whether this potential could be developed safely or whether it would inevitably lead to psychological breakdown and death. As Maria prepared for her next mission, she realized that she was no longer just a soldier serving the coalition. She was becoming humanity's first ambassador to levels of consciousness that existed beyond biological evolution. The war for galactic dominance was about to become something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined.